Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai, welcome to the Early Childhood Seminar Series. We'll begin our time together with a karakia. Me inoi tātou. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa ponamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki. We're delighted to have you with us today for a presentation by Dr. Alison Warren from Te Rito Maiaha. And Alison will be sharing ideas and provocations from her doctoral research exploring emotions in early childhood teaching and the implications of this for the professional hats that early childhood kaiako wear. The recording of this presentation will be available on our Early Childhood Seminar Series YouTube channel after the seminar. Please do use the chat function to connect with each other and the panelists. And if you have any questions during the presentation that you would like Alison to respond to, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So it's just to the left of the chat button. Use that Q&A function to ask your questions and Alison will respond to them at the end of her presentation. I will now pass over to my colleague, Dr. Kitty Gould, to welcome and introduce our speaker. Kia ora, Kitty.
Kia ora, thank you, Justine. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Alison Warren and her contribution to the Early Childhood Seminar Series, Shaping Professional Hats in Early Childhood Teaching. Alison is a senior lecturer at Te Rito Maiaha and she is based in Nelson. So we've just been having some interesting conversations about the differences between Nelson and Auckland. I recently had the pleasure of listening to Alison present at the Reconceptualizing Early Childhood Conference in Canada, where we were both virtual participants, where she was thinking about bicultural early childhood education by exploring aspects of post-human theory in Te Ao Māori. And it's really this Alison's use of theory that excites me about her work, and I'm looking forward to hearing about today. Alison's use of plugging in of different theories, and in particular, I've heard her talk about Deleuzian theory and aspects of post-human theory to open up new complexities and possibilities for understanding teacher identities, curriculum, and practices that I really enjoy about her work. I believe tonight's presentation comes out of aspects of her PhD work and also her subsequent thinking around the entanglements of emotion, care, love, and professionalism in teachers' work. So welcome, Alison. We're really looking forward to having our thinking challenged by you and thinking into new spaces around these things with you. And I'm really looking forward to listening to you and connecting with you during the Q&A afterwards.
Kia ora, Kiri, thanks so much. Nau mai, haere mai. Welcome to this seminar. I feel really honoured to be sharing ideas with you in this forum. I invite you to join me in considering some possibilities for thinking differently about and with early childhood curriculum in Aotearoa, where Te Whāriki describes curriculum as all the experiences, activities and events, both direct and indirect, that occur within the ECE setting. The imaginary of professional hat arose several times in a focus group discussion about emotions in early childhood teaching. I am intrigued by what this imaginary can do to perceptions of teaching and learning, and I look forward to speculating about this with you. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko maunga tapu te maunga, ko mai tahi te awa, ko whakatū te marae e te rohe e mahi ana ahau. Ko Alison Warren tōku ingoa. No ahuriri ahau e nāiane e noho ana ahau ki Waimeha e te tau ihu o te waka a Maui. He kaya rahi mataranga a rohe ahau ki Te Rito Maiaha o whakatū. I'm Alison Warren. I work for Te Rito Maiaha Early Childhood New Zealand in Whakatū Nelson, where I'm Senior Lecturer and Regional Education Leader. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I will start this seminar by talking about my research study and the professional hat imaginary, and then orient our thinking by situating Te Whāriki within diverse ways that curriculum can be conceptualised. This will be followed by a description of the methodology that frames this seminar. I will introduce 2 excerpts of data from one participant in a focus group discussion and use 4 theoretical approaches to weave together some different ways of understanding early childhood teaching and learning. Then I will present a poem that weaves a complex and messy story, raising possibilities to rethink how, as ECE kaiako, teacher educators and scholars, we might think with and enact early childhood curriculum, teaching and learning as we fashion and refashion our professional hats. The research study that I'm drawing on today is my doctoral research into emotions in early childhood teaching. In 2017, I met with 2 focus groups of ECE kaiako to discuss their understandings of emotions in their professional lives. The data that I will share today comes from one of these discussions. There were 7 participants in this group, 1 male and 6 female kaiako, from a range of ECE centres, including kindergartens, education and care centres, infant and toddler settings, and a Pacific centre. Some participants were Pākehā and some of Pacific heritage. Each discussion opened with general discussion about emotions in early childhood teaching and continued with consideration of how early childhood teachers might experience and express emotions in various everyday teaching situations. This group chose to discuss 3 options from a list of 10 everyday situations. They were greeting children and their families on arrival and settling in, professional interactions with colleagues, and helping children who are sick or injured. The research study also involved observations and research conversations with 4 kaiako participants in their ECE centre. That part of the study does not directly inform this seminar, but has been very generative in terms of my thinking and writing about emotions, love and care in early childhood education and care. The kaiako in the focus group discussion used the professional hat imaginary when they talked about how they managed their experiences and expressions of emotions within negotiated and fluid processes of professionalism. An imaginary has similarities with a metaphor, but is more complex and open-ended. It leaves room for multiple and uncertain ways of understanding what is meant by, in this case, a professional hat. It can mean different things in different situations and contexts. Sometimes putting on a professional hat suggested repressing, controlling, managing and hiding emotions according to what is regarded as professionalism. For these participants, professionalism seemed to be understood as a kind of tempering valve to maintain a positive, warm, effective tone. However, participants expressed agency in their negotiations of professionalism as they fashioned and refashioned their professional hats using skills and creativity. For example, Lucy, and that's a pseudonym, she was the participant whose data I use in this webinar, in this seminar. She asserted that close personal relationships among colleagues can enrich a team within a shared understanding of professionalism. And she said, it's like professionalism of remembering you are actually colleagues and you do actually have a professional hat. But then those friendships can have a huge added bonus to the centre and your other colleagues, and because you do know each other. You can regulate each other's emotions and be there for each other as friends, but you've still got that professional hat. So the best of both worlds, really. So how do we make a link between an imaginary or professional hat as a means for kaiako to negotiate professionalism with understandings and enactments of early childhood curriculum. I do this by firstly taking an affirmative and critical view of Te Whāriki, and secondly by taking an account of something that happened in an ECE setting and diffracting it through 4 theoretical lenses to expand our understandings of early childhood curriculum as Te Whāriki says, all the experiences, activities and events, both direct and indirect, that occur within the ECE setting. Affirmative critique critically attends to power relations, constraints, normalisation and injustices. The affirmative aspect of affirmative critique also connects critique with creativity and seeks openings for innovation. This is what I intend to do in this seminar by addressing how teachers and teaching, children and learning, and curriculum constitute each other in a story from data from the research study. I put the data in encounter with 4 theoretical lenses to weave a complex and messy story. Forces come into view that constrain and enable what happens and how it is understood. And critically and affirmatively, the story also opens innovative ways to conceptualize teaching and learning. My message today is that such an approach of combining critique with creativity has important implications for how children's learning might be assessed, how it is noticed, recognised and responded to, and how teaching might be evaluated in early childhood settings. As I know you are aware, Te Whāriki is regarded as a reconceptualist early childhood curriculum framework. It departs from positivist views of curriculum as schedules of universally agreed knowledge to be transmitted to learners. Sociocultural and post-structuralist theories have contributed to the understanding of curriculum in Te Whāriki as contextual, constructed, contested and complex, as Maggie Haggerty tells us. I would also say that there is an openness to complexity and relationality in the incorporation of sociocultural, kaupapa Māori, Pacific and critical theories in Te Whāriki, and this makes space for also exploring what post-humanist theories can do and produce in early childhood curriculum. By post-humanist theories, I mean understandings that human individuals, such as tamariki and kaiako, and everything else in the early childhood setting, are being continually produced in networks of relationships. These networks encompass humans and non-humans, living and material entities, ideas, thoughts, and emotions. And this speaks to the characterization of curriculum as woven mat, or whāriki. As you also know, Te Whāriki consists of 2 documents. Te Whāriki weaves Māori and Pākehā understandings together for early childhood education settings, while Te Whāriki a te kohanga reo works within a Māori worldview to provide curricular guidance to ngā kohanga reo. The early childhood curriculum in both documents is framed by the same set of principles and learning strands underpinned by concepts from Te Ao Māori. ECE kaiako, as government agents in the education system, must acknowledge their complicity in continuing colonisation and critically and creatively explore otherwise opportunities. I hope that this seminar points to one means of addressing this challenge. The 2017 revision of Te Whāriki does emphasise deeper engagement with Te Ao Māori and highlights kaiako responsibility to enact bicultural curriculum, according to Rameka and Suter. Maori worldviews frames tamariki as socially, spiritually, historically, and materially embedded and entangled in networks of relations that extend over generations, a view that post-humanist thinking can resonate with. However, Ritchie and Skerritt critique the revised curriculum from a concern for Maori self-determination and sustainability. They position Te Whāriki and early childhood education within ongoing social injustices experienced by Maori, and they assert that these are not addressed effectively in Te Whāriki, despite critical theory being named as informing the curriculum. Post-humanist theories offer opportunities to think about how entangled components of early childhood settings constitute each other within curriculum. This seminar focuses on discussion of entanglements of early childhood curriculum, tamariki, whānau, kaiako, teaching and learning, and material environments. I bring attention to understandings of professionalism and the imaginary of professional hat. I suggest reconceptualizing Te Whāriki to incorporate post-humanist theories alongside sociocultural, kaupapa Māori, Pacific, and critical theories. Weaving multiple theoretical frameworks diffractively produces a variety of post-humanist mapping and storying processes, as I will now go on to describe. Diffraction. Diffraction is a methodological approach where the researcher is seen as entangled, produced, and producing along with everything else in the research setting. This differs from a reflective approach where a researcher might stand apart from the research to observe what's going on in a detached way. Diffractive readings of data attend to differences and multiple understandings rather than seeking to confine analyses to categories and themes. In this seminar, I take a position of understanding myself as researcher implicated in the creation of this complex and messy story produced from data in relation with 4 theoretical approaches. I carefully attend to what happens and what is produced when diverse theories encounter data. Through this process of diffractive affirmative critique, I hope to notice and suggest opportunities for creative innovation in early childhood teaching and curriculum. Cartography is conceptualized here as a post-humanist mapping of connections, intensities, affective flows, and power relations. As Rosie Braidotti puts it, a theoretically based and politically informed account of the present. I have produced a cartography for this seminar in the form of a poem that maps connections, intensities, affective flows, and power relations. This poem, Cartography, works with 2 focus group discussion data excerpts from participant Lucy. And here's the first excerpt. I asked the group towards the end of the discussion, in what ways do early childhood teachers experience emotions in their professional settings? And Lucy summarised the discussion in this way. We've mostly said we experience them in a professional way and then may at times sneak in a personal way that we need to do it. You know, when we get to those extreme times when we need our colleagues to support us, we're experiencing a particularly difficult situation, that personal kind of way we experience emotions might creep in. But I think mostly we've distinguished that we keep that professional hat on and push them down and do what's best for the children. And the second data excerpt, also from Lucy, as she tells a story. I was just thinking about a child I had who was sick and he needed eye drops. And this was so traumatic for him, putting the eye drops in, but we had to do it to make him better. Otherwise, it was just going to get worse. I found that I could, if I was by myself, and could get him to lie down, put his head on my knee, and then I could put them in. That was okay. But once he got escalated and I had to ask my colleague to come in, my emotions started kicking in. My colleague was trying to hug him and going, "You're okay, you're okay." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I'm not okay." We just wanted to make him feel better, and we knew we had to give him his eye drops, and he doesn't want them. We could get him to the point of lying down, but then he'd see you get the bottle and he was like, "Oh," and he's off again. That's always stuck with me because I keep reflecting, going, how could I have done that better? That's just what I fall back to. I just had to get them into his eye. There's just no better way to do it, and just get on and deal with it. As we approach the midpoint of my presentation, let's gather together the threads of my discussion before moving into unpacking the 4 theoretical approaches that combined with these data to create the poem Cartography. So far, I have outlined the research study and explained how the professional hat imaginary arose in the discussion to express ways in which kaiako manage their experiences and expressions of emotions while negotiating complexities and tensions of professionalism. I explained that affirmative critique combines critique with creativity, noticing how power relations and constraining and enabling forces work, while also seeking openings for innovative responses to complex situations. I described Te Whāriki as a reconceptualist curriculum that is open to multiple theoretical approaches and that holds particular responsibilities to Māori tamariki, whānau, and kaiako through incorporating Te Ao Māori concepts and theories and attending to issues of social justice. My key message so far is that we can rethink early childhood curriculum, teaching and learning expansively, critically, and creatively using post-humanist theories and concepts. This is in keeping with Te Whāriki intentions for curriculum to respond to diversities and localised contexts and to be inclusive of, as it says, all the experiences, activities, and events, both direct and indirect, that occur within the ECE setting. I used 4 theoretical approaches to diffractively weave a complex and messy cartographic story. These are the 4 approaches. Rhizoanalysis, which draws on the work of Deleuze and Guattari. Radical pedagogy and meta-modelling, as described by Erin Manning. Expansive storying and tentacular thinking, inspired by the work of Donna Haraway. And storying using some concepts from Te Ao Māori. The concept of rhizomatic assemblage describes multi-directional networks of relations where bodies are continuously coming into being. For Deleuze and Guattari, the bodies are continuously produced by the relationship where effect flows. So effect is what causes changes to occur through affecting and being affected. Effect does not flow evenly. Rather, the flows of effect can be enabled and constrained by micro and macro political forces. In the case of the second data excerpt, where Lucy was attempting to apply eye drops to a resisting child, macro political forces such as health and safety policies, expectations around restraining children, and societal expectations of warm, caring kaiako enable some ways of being child and kaiako and limit other ways of being. Micro-political forces in this assemblage might include the nature of the particular relationship between Lucy and this child, and previous experiences that warn the child of stinging eyes. Rhizoanalysis involves tracing the macro and micro political forces that limit the ways of being and becoming, and at the same time mapping the forces that might enable new happenings and possibilities. In this case, rhizoanalysis might help Lucy and her colleague understand why the situation is so difficult, and may suggest some other innovative strategies for managing this situation. And I remind you that this can be understood in terms of curriculum that encompasses all the experiences, activities, and events, both direct and indirect, that occur within the ECE setting, where teachers have certain responsibilities in terms of the teaching and learning that is happening. The second of 4 theoretical approaches used to create this complex and messy story comes from Erin Manning's concept of radical pedagogy. Manning challenges us to take a transversal approach and look outside the boundaries that limit the scope of our thinking about early childhood education. For example, limiting ourselves to assessing children's learning and evaluating teaching in terms of developmental psychology or sociocultural theory can mean that we miss other ways of understanding what we see and experience as kaiako. If modelling is understood as using these familiar theories to build models of teaching and learning, then meta-modelling challenges us to look beyond what we take for granted and think that we know. Manning describes a transversal approach to pedagogy that works across disciplines and is open to unexpected connections, following children's what she calls wander lines or unexpected directions of learning. Taking such a transversal approach goes beyond familiar patterns, helping pedagogues to conceptualize children as researchers of life, makers of worlds. In the case of the situation of applying eye drops, a transversal approach might work across disciplines such as education, medicine, whānau responsibilities, with teaching and learning happening across these. Donna Haraway's bag lady storytelling approach wanders haphazardly amongst unexpectedly interconnected aspects that might be human and non-human, corporeal and incorporeal. This approach departs from traditional expectations of linear and coherent stories of human heroic protagonists with beginning, middle, and end. Bag lady storytelling might pay attention to aspects on the periphery that do not usually come to notice, opening possible new and unexpected insights. Tentacular thinking is a concept that can be used alongside bag lady storytelling. According to Haraway, tentacularity is characterized by reaching out, exploring, responding to all manner of things. According to Jane Osgood, tentacular researchers are deeply thoughtful, curious, entangled wayfarers who pay careful attention and become attuned to entanglements. In our example, a tentacular researcher might wander among stinging eye drops, itching infected eyes, tears of an upset kaiako, and a medication consent and record. A Maori worldview is underpinned by ontologies of networked relationalities, relationships among human collectives present and past, relationships of humans interwoven with the natural world, including living, non-living and material components, and relationships with the spiritual world. For example, Te Whāriki uses this whakatauki. Tu mai e moko, te whakaata o mātua, te moko o tipuna. Stand strong, O grandchild, the reflection of your parents, the blueprint of your ancestors. The contribution to diffractive storying in this article uses concepts from a Maori worldview that draws on Te Whāriki, Te Whatu Pōkeka, and the writing of Te Whāriki, with particular attention to the concept of mana. Mana is a multifaceted concept of power that derives from the spiritual world, from whakapapa, iwi, hapu, whānau, and from tūranga waiwai. According to Te Whāriki, tamariki are nurtured in the knowledge that they are loved and respected, that their physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional strength will build mana, influence, and control, and that having mana is the enabling and empowering tool to controlling their own destiny. The complex and messy story that comes next in this seminar incorporates these Te Ao Māori concepts and values to consider the network of rationalities that surrounds this child and their mana in this curricular enactment. Complex and messy story. Diffracting diverse post-humanist theoretical approaches with the data excerpts has produced a story that traverses disciplinary thinking of early childhood education, of medical care of children, and of Māori concepts and values. Manning recommends that we work with what is there, listen to what is already moving. Don't cut too quickly what might otherwise feed the process. Be sensitive to what else is moving through it. Words from the data excerpts, and I show the first excerpt in bold and the second in bold italics in this story that follows, are woven with words that express the four theoretical approaches previously outlined. I do need to point out that all the text in the story comes from the article the seminar is based on, which is under review at present. The Māori concepts of tapu, sacred, set apart, prohibited, and noa, ordinary, unrestricted, and their relevance to the data arose in discussion with my colleague, Sandra Tuakaraina. And here is the complex, messy story. Refashioning tentacular professional hats. Shape-shifting, ragged, frayed, tangled shimmering threads trailing, unstable and contingent imaginary. Mostly we keep that professional hat on, push emotions down, and do what's best for the children. Hats for curious exploring, reaching out, cultivating creative responsibility. Deeply thoughtful, curious, and tangled wayfarers. We experience emotions in a professional way, and then at times may sneak in a personal way that we need to do it. Negotiated and fluid processes of professionalism. That always stuck with me because I keep reflecting, going, how could I have done that better? Eye drop stinging. The woven mat of Te Whāriki. All the experiences, activities, and events. The child is perpetually becoming and not being defined once and for all. Researcher of life, maker of worlds. This was so traumatic for him putting the eye drops in, but we had to do it to make him feel better. Otherwise, it was just going to get worse. Transversal spaces, medicine, pharmacy, prescription, education, care, curriculum, teaching, health and safety, home, whānau, upbringing, responsibility. Tū mai e moko, te whakaato o matua, te moko o tipuna. Stand strong, O grandchild, the reflection of your parents, blueprint of your ancestors. Care and responsibility. Materialities of tentacular hands touching, grasping, offering, refusing, caring, reassuring, restraining, resisting. I could get him to lie down and put his head on my knee, and then I could put them in. Noa means ordinary, unrestricted. Emotions are calm. But then he'd see you get the bottle and he was like, oh, and he's off again. Those extreme times when we need our colleagues to support us, we're experiencing a particularly difficult situation. Trying to hug him and going, you're okay, you're okay. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not okay. Tapu means sacred, set apart, prohibited. My emotions started kicking in. Mana is power. Children are nurtured in the knowledge that they are loved and respected, that their physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional strength will build mana, influence, and control. That having mana is the enabling and empowering tool to controlling their own destiny. We just wanted to make him feel better. Knowledge is a verb that whirls, becoming child, approaching childness. What if teachers told strange, fragmented, and unexpected stories as a sign of their expertise, not as a sign of failing in being professional? These stories do not have beginnings and ends. They have continuations, interruptions, and reformulations. In what ways do early childhood teachers experience emotions in their professional settings? Socially, spiritually, historically, and materially embedded and entangled. This cartographic story performs post-humanist affirmative critique of early childhood curriculum by mapping connections, intensities, affective flows, and power relations. Entanglements of children, teachers, families, curriculum, and theoretical ideas produce understandings of early childhood teaching and professionalism as fluid, negotiated processes where components continually constitute each other. Te Whāriki is reconceptualized as early childhood curriculum that encompasses networks of relationalities in ways that can be diffractively understood within concepts of assemblage, transversality, tentacularity, and webs of reciprocity of a Maori worldview. Diffraction is not synthesis. There are convergences and divergences in the story that produce tension and interest. How the story addresses early childhood professionalism demonstrates tensions between diverse conceptualizations of professionalism. A transversal view of professionalism in this story reminds us of Lucy's negotiations of the right thing to do across medical, care-based, and learning-focused aspects of early childhood teaching. Human bodies, such as the teacher cradling the child running away, affect and are affected by components such as stinging eyes, bottle of eye drops, instructions in the early childhood assemblage. The Maori concept of mana brings professionalism as relational and reciprocal into view, where Lucy as kaiako is responsible for noticing where ordinary calm emotions escalate into upset high emotions that threaten the child's mana. The poem Cartography introduces a curricular enactment where curriculum is understood as all experiences, activities, and events, including some that might seem unlikely to be chosen for a narrative learning story in an early childhood setting. An account of how teacher, child, infection, medication, pain, hugs, and upset and calm emotions are continuously becoming in relation to each other, offers opportunities to move away from a narrow view of what learning the child may be experiencing and what teaching is happening. The complex and messy story offered here is not necessarily intended as a model for future pedagogical documentation, but rather as an example of what can happen and what can be produced when diverse theories entangle with data, with teachers, and with researchers. Early childhood teachers continually fashion and refashion their professional hats, using theoretical tools available to them. Early childhood teacher subjectivities can form and reform in ways that open to exploring pedagogical opportunities and to cultivate professional, caring, response ability. Te Whāriki takes multiple theoretical approaches, claiming sociocultural, kaupapa Māori, Pacific, and critical theories as underpinning the curriculum. Adding post-humanist theories enables early childhood teachers to seek expansive pedagogical responses rather than best practice once and for all solutions. My sincere thanks go to the kaiako who generously participated in my doctoral research, and especially to Lucy for her insight and openness about uncomfortable aspects of being an ECE kaiako. And thank you also to Sandy Tuakaraina for her guidance with the concepts of tapu and noa, as well as the wisdom that she offers me every day in our work together. And I have two final slides with the references, which I will click through and stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison, for your presentation and for your perspective on professionalism that reminds us that it's a contestable, fluid, complex, nuanced concept that really can't be singularly or universally defined. I can see one question. Someone's saying, can you please show the reference pages one more time? I wonder, will the PowerPoint be made available to people?
It can be. I was just thinking that if somebody had the recording, they could just pause at that point.
Yes, yeah. So just a reminder that the presentation's been recorded and will be available on the ECE Seminar Series YouTube page in a few days. I had some questions listening to you. I'm always really excited when I listen to you because I think there's a few early childhood academics in New Zealand who are trying to engage with the complexities of, new post-human theories in terms of what it means in terms of early childhood practice. And I really liked your idea of, the image of a teacher as a curious, deeply thoughtful and entangled wayfarer. And I wondered whether you had any advice for early childhood centres who want to begin to kind of plug into some of these theories to think about their practices more deeply, how they might go about starting that process.
Oh, that's a jolly good question. And there is certainly a body of literature within early childhood education, both in Aotearoa and internationally, that do use these theories. In fact, probably they have made more headway in early childhood education than in other areas of education. I've heard other people say this too. My theory on that is that young children are naturally post-humanist. They understand about complexities. They understand that they can have a relationship with a tree or a sandpit shovel, as well as their best mate in their kaiako. They get that, and they understand about complexities and relationships. So writers such as Jane Osgood, who I referenced, would be one of the most prolific writers in early childhood and using those theories. But we also have some great Australian scholars, and I'm thinking of Marg Somerville, who writes a lot about water and country. So there's resonances there with our engagement with Te Ao Māori, Mindy Blaze. There is a good body of literature out there that can be quite easily accessed.
I really liked your suggestion as Deleuze and Guattari also talk about, keeping concepts on the move and cutting in, and that idea of micro and macro lenses. And I wondered whether, teaching teams could even have a little vignette or narrative like the narrative of the eye drops and think into that, you know, using these different ideas. I think sometimes teachers are intimidated by the names of the theories or the complexity of them, but actually can grasp onto particular concepts that might be useful before they understand the whole thing. Have you done anything like that with your student teachers?
Oh, that's not personally, I haven't, and it would be fantastic. I think that probably in my role in Te Rito Mai Oha in Whakatū Nelson, that it would be more along the lines of PLD workshops. I think that would be the way where you could work with teams, and as you say, just sort of, it's sometimes it is those things that escape our notice, and I think that sometimes we can feel a bit jaded with sort of writing the same learning stories over again a bit, and sometimes it's nice to look at something unexpected, but also amongst teaching teams to talk about the things that are a little bit uncomfortable, you know, such as the eye drops thing, because it's not an unfamiliar situation, I wouldn't think, but it's probably not something that gets itself into many learning stories. But I think that it's quite empowering to think about all the different forces, macro and micro political forces that are operating all the time, and so that we can, and sometimes it's not a matter of, you know, we're not completely helpless, but we certainly are constrained. So it is about finding, you know, those little things that we can tweak. You know, Cohen's thing about the crack where the light gets in. I think that is often a really helpful sort of idea.
Yeah. A lot of the story of the eye drops really spoke to me about the emotional labour that teachers undertake as a part of their everyday work. And I had a question from Justine here about whether that teacher that said, you're okay, oh my goodness, I'm not okay, which I think really spoke to anyone who's been in that situation or a similar situation.
Yes.
And she wants to know, did the teachers talk about how they got to the point of being okay? And which particular entanglements did teachers identify as contributing to or supporting their well-being and ongoing ability to respond with care?
Oh yes, there's lots of questions in that question. I mean, I do go back to the first excerpt from Lucy, where she talks about, you know, generally we tick along and work within our professional expectations, but sometimes, you know, we can feel the emotion getting away on us, and then perhaps we use our colleagues to help us through and kind of unpack the situation. But I think, you know, acknowledging that professionalism is negotiated, and that it involves skills and creativity, and kind of recognising where you've got those skills and those opportunities for creativity can help you kind of accept the emotion ebb and flow and not necessarily blame yourself. I think a lot of the discussion actually in that first focus group discussion, and I think there's quite a lot more scope for perhaps thinking and writing from that, which I hadn't sort of remembered until I came back to preparing for this, was that teachers have got an amazing range of skills and creativity, and there's they have lots and lots of stories of when they've encountered, well, in my discussion, encountered emotions, or emotions have arisen, and they've had to really negotiate, really manage, and kind of always that tension between, am I authentic with these children, but where's the limit? Where do I get to be too authentic? You know, there's always that sort of tension and negotiation happening all the time.
Yeah, those are really interesting things to think about. What is the place of emotion in our work as teachers, and how do we navigate that line of balancing, managing, and authentic expression?
I know, that's right. Yeah.
Is there anything in your work, do you think, that teachers could draw on that might, do you think this kind of work around plugging in different theories or thinking creatively or diffractively can support teacher wellbeing in any way? And could you speak to that?
Absolutely. I think it's, I mean, I love that stuff. So I'm probably not the only person who loves new ways of thinking. I assume that there'll be lots of kaiako who actually get a buzz out of having some new thinking tools to, and actually to manage that well-being. That's a really good point. That, I guess sometimes our well-being is negatively impacted when those constraining forces way too heavy, and where the enabling forces, the possibilities for agency, for new things to come out, don't appear to be there. And so often, I think, having some new thinking tools, like that that thing about the tentacular thinking and the bag lady storytelling, that to have a story that doesn't have a particular beginning, middle, and end, and that kind of wanders all over the place and brings in different things, shouldn't be seen as a failure of professionalism. It should be seen as being professional, as being creative. But there's always that sort of, so where do I use it and how do I use it? And I think teams of kaiako can find those opportunities to sort of expand their thinking. It is like tools in the keti, the thinking tools. I really like that idea of thinking with. And for me, the most wonderful thing that came out of my doctoral study was that I will never think the same again. That it just taught me to think differently. And I think for me that's wonderful. And I guess for other people they might find that too.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you on that. There's one final, it's not a question, just a comment from a participant saying, not a question, but thank you for some wonderful deep food for thought. And I totally agree.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it would be lovely if we could all just get into a room and have a cup of tea and discuss all these ideas.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Oops, I think one more question just popped up. It says post-humanism in early childhood settings doesn't mean we need to facilitate more interactions between tamariki and place, animals and nature, rather than only with people.
Yeah. I think that children would agree that that's how life is. That I think it is that the noticing, recognizing, and responding. What is it that catches our eyes? And if we can start thinking in a post-humanist way, and we notice those relationships and how, and you referred to my ECE presentation about the place of place, what place does, and that is part of that. In that case, it was like noticing what sand and stones and sticks can do in relation with place, with history, with humans. So just widening the gaze.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I think I will hand it back to Justine, unless there's any other questions coming in on the Q&A. Doesn't look like it.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Alison. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you, Kitty, and thank you, Alison, for sharing with us this evening. I think you really just emphasised how complex early childhood teaching is as a role, and how we do all wear so many different hats in the space of a day. So thank you for the provocations that you've offered to encourage us to critique with creativity, to think differently, to try and be innovative in the ways that we refashion our professional hats in early childhood teaching in Aotearoa. So ngā mihi nui ki a koe. Thank you.
Sure.
To our early childhood seminar series audience, thank you for sharing your questions and your responses to Alison's presentation. If you'd like to share or revisit this particular presentation, please do check out our Early Childhood Seminar Series YouTube channel. The recording of the seminar will be available in a couple of days. And for those who were keen to see Alison's list of references again, you'll be able to go and pause the video and read them all. We are looking forward to seeing you all back for our next seminar, which will be on Monday, the 22nd of August. And Dr. Daniel Lovett will be joining us to talk about flying sausages and children's working theories. Who can resist a title like that? So do keep an eye on your inbox for the flyer and registration information. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Kia tau torangi Mārie, ki runga i ngā iwi o te ao. Let your peace reign on all the people of the world. Kia kaha, kia ora, kia atawhai, ka kite anō.